3 things that you should do after you find yourself in a car accident or a motor vehicle accident in New York State?
Well, it's really important to make sure you contact an attorney because that attorney will make sure that you're taking all the initial steps and that you're not going to miss any deadlines. The second thing is you should contact a doctor because in a motor vehicle accident case, it's super important to have treatment right away so that your condition is documented. And it's extremely important to get your no-fault application filed. And your no-fault application is through the car that you were in, and that car or that insurance will cover your basic medical expenses, household help, and travel expenses, lost wages, things like that that are related to the accident.
Now, a lot of people watching this are going to think to themselves after they're in a car accident, I'm not the type of person who sues. I'm not the type of person who wants to call an attorney and sue someone. So can you explain to people just a little bit watching this, again, that just because you're contacting an attorney doesn't mean that you're suing another individual. That attorney is essentially there, and correct me if I'm wrong, to protect you and make sure you get what you need to get from that insurance company. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I mean, it's important to understand how the process works. So, in brief, basically, the initial steps of a car accident case is a lot of communication between attorney, your insurance, and the other driver's insurance. Because in most cases, now there's always exceptions where the time frame is shortened, but you will have 3 years to file a lawsuit from day of accident. Now, like I said, it's different if it involves a government entity or school district, town, things like that. You have a much shorter time frame, which is also important. The importance of contacting a lawyer, but for the first 6 months to a year, sometimes even more, depending upon your treatment and care, it's an ongoing communication of your treatment and getting the medical records until you're at the point of either maximum improvement or you're done with treatment. And then at that point, your attorney will put together a settlement letter, obviously depending on the circumstances, that encloses all of your medicals, because that is what the insurance company will base any amount of money that they're going to offer you off of. And that will jumpstart the settlement negotiations, and it's only after those settlement negotiations fail where you would actually file the lawsuit. So sometimes it's years after your accident because you have to let somebody treat, develop, and get that documentation.
And that kind of goes into the next point that we mentioned, which is calling a doctor. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize when it comes to no-fault injuries are that just because someone says they're injured, just because someone says they have pain, especially if you didn't break a bone or suffer from, organ dysfunction or permanent dismemberment, no one's going to believe you that you're injured unless that's documented. And the only way to have that properly documented is to see a physician that's aware of no-fault documentation and car accident documentation. For example, and you guys probably see this all the time, we have patients come in who have disc herniations after a car accident, whiplash injuries after a car accident, aggravation of old injuries after a car accident. And it's our job as the treating provider to document those injuries and then provide the patient with other testing, MRIs, range of motion testing, nerve conduction study testing, that's going to prove to the insurance company and to whomever it is you guys are dealing with that this person actually did suffer a significant injury, even though they don't have a broken bone or something like that. So it's and then of course, outside of the lawsuit, you guys want the same thing. We want you to get better. You don't want to have a permanent injury. You don't want to suffer the rest of your life with low back pain or whiplash. You want to move on with your life. But it is so important, I think, to seek proper medical care. And kind of like you mentioned too, Blake was just explaining how this occurs over the course of a year or over time. If you see a physician like we are here at Northtown Chiropractic and Injury Rehab, we'll help people get to the pain management doctor. We'll help with that orthopedic referral. And you need to see these different physicians because we need, one, it's always good to have more than one eye on your injury. God forbid we miss something or your primary care doctor misses something. We always want to have that other input. But then from the standpoint of a legal standpoint as well too, that's just further documentation to prove your injury.
Yeah, and Dr. Frank, when you said that, it triggered something in my brain, which a key thing in these cases is having medical proof, because obviously as attorneys, we're not medical experts. You yourself, you know that you're hurt, but unless you're a doctor yourself, most of the time you are also not a medical expert that's qualified to talk about injuries. But it's important to have a doctor that could put an affidavit or something together in writing on paper to say to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, this accident caused this injury. And we were just talking about this off the video, but it's important for that to have that care early on so that a doctor could be confident in putting that on paper that yes, this accident related to the injury to the accident, right?
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. And then the last point that we discussed, which I just want to touch on a little bit further, is you mentioned the filing of this no-fault application. With insurance companies, there's deadlines that you have to meet. There's also deadlines that as medical professionals we have to meet when it comes to submitting documentation. And I think one of the best parts about having an attorney is they're going to help walk you through those deadlines and the things that you should be doing after a car accident. Because if you miss those deadlines, no fault might have a little more leniency than maybe workers' comp or a slip and fall case. I don't know. But each injury type is different, and that's why I think having an attorney is so valuable.
Yeah, and just kind of piggybacking on that, if you were in an accident with somebody who is a representative of one of these, like we said, town, city, school district, things like that, village, anything like that, there are certain notices that they have to be served with in a short period of time. And if they are not served with those notices, then you cannot bring your claim. So that's why it's important to see a lawyer that can look at the paperwork and really analyze and relate it back to the law and say, okay, this person falls within this category that requires this notice. And if you miss a deadline, then your case is over.
Then your case is over. Blake, and then we wanted to give you guys 3 bonus tips in this video that you can take home. Those are the top things we recommend doing, but 3 bonus tips for you guys. And Blake, the first one that we have written down here, take photographs of the damage of your vehicle and make sure to give that to your attorney. Why is that so important? Like, aren't the police going to document the damage, or no? Should the person do that as well?
Well, they should document it on the police accident report if one is done, which in most cases it will be. But it's important because it will show the location of damage on the vehicles, and that will be important if it's a close call case to prove who was at fault. Because obviously, for example, there might be cases where a person is making a left-hand turn and an accident happens. Obviously, if the damage was closer to the passenger side, that means the person was almost completely into their turn, and that changes who was at fault. Because obviously, if you're making a left, person coming towards you has the right of way, unless someone is already within an intersection so close as to cause a hazard. So it's really important because there are close calls in a lot of cases. I mean, obviously, if it's a rear end accident, then that's clear cut. But in a lot of cases, the damage will show where the impact was, which will then prove who is at fault. Or help prove it.
Super informative. Thank you for that. Our second bonus tip for you guys, bring a written estimate of the damage to your attorney of the vehicle. So you want to go get a written estimate, and where are you getting that from? A collision shop? Do you recommend getting more than one estimate? What?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the more the better, but usually one is sufficient. Yeah, I mean, you could bring it to a collision shop. A lot of the times your insurance company will, through no fault, will have it appraised or will value the damages, in determining what amount of money that they're going to pay out for the damages in your vehicle, if any. So that could help, but it's important because it will show us, it will tell us how heavy the impact was.
Got it.
So if it was light, medium, heavy impact, that obviously helps to say, yeah, there was a lot of property damage here, so therefore this person must have
probably has some significant injury,
Yeah.
and then hopefully that does correlate to your medical record documentation.
Yep.
And lastly, I think this one goes without saying, guys, make sure that your attorney has a copy of your vehicle's liability insurance policy and any of the insurance documentation, because again, the important thing for everyone to understand is you're not necessarily suing the other person. You're using an attorney to make sure that your rights are protected and that you're able to utilize whatever you're paying for from your insurance, right? So it's your insurance policy that's going to be paying for these medical visits. It's the insurance policies of yours or the other person's that are going to be paying for these settlements. So it's paramount that you guys have a copy of that insurance policy. Is that not correct?
Yeah, and and that's important too. And you are suing another person, but in most, in New York State, there's a requirement that you have insurance on your vehicle, and I believe the minimum that you can have is $25,000, meaning that if you're involved in an accident with a person that has a minimum policy, because you are limited to the policy that's on the other vehicle. So even if you have, and this kind of ties into why it's important to have a copy of your policy, because let's say, God forbid, you're in an accident and you have a broken neck. The other driver only has the minimum coverage, $25,000. Obviously, a broken neck is worth more than $25,000.
Yes.
And a lot of the times, if you have a bad injury and there's insufficient coverage, you can if the insurance company for the other driver offers you the full policy and your insurance on your vehicle is more,
Yes.
then you have an opportunity to go for more insurance on your vehicle if the other's insurance is exhausted. So providing your attorney with that copy will allow them to know that.
To make that determination.
Mm-hmm.
Those are excellent tips. Blake, I want to thank you for sharing this information with people. We're going to
Thank
put
you,
out a
too.
lot more videos, I would say, regarding these topics. We're going to go into a lot more detail. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to comment below. We'll do our best to answer the questions in any way that we can. And feel free to reach out to the email associated with our YouTube channel, and we'll get back to you guys. Blake, thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much.
Of course.